It was a police takedown of a 16-year-old in a high school in South Carolina that made headlines this week. This video getting millions of views of a police deputy going after a high school student in her algebra class. Lots of questions are being raised about the role of police in schools, what they should be doing, what they should not be doing, and at what point they should be called in to intervene. My guest now is Lisa Thurau. She is the founder and executive director of Strategies for Youth. It's an organization that trains school officers around the U.S. She joins us from Cambridge in Massachusetts. And thanks so much for taking time to talk to us today. I have a question for you. Why are there police officers in some schools in the U.S.?
Well, historically, they have been placed there starting in large numbers in 1993 and 1994 with the Safe Schools Act and a large subsidy from the federal government, U.S. Department of Justice, Community Orienting Policing Services. And we saw an increased push to have them there after some of the school shooting incidents, such as Columbine, and then again with the Newtown shooting. There's unfortunately, an unequal distribution of them. We see school resource officers and that kind of disciplinary approach to youth most concentrated in schools where there are youth of color and poor youth. And we see generally quite a resistance to having police officers in suburban and upper class white schools.
And Lisa, what are the guidelines on the books? I mean, how clear are those guidelines in terms of what police can and can't do, what they should and should not intervene into?
Well, I'm clearly talking to a Canadian because you have a notion of a federalist government with a clear set of rules and regulations, and we don't have that in the United States. There is no federal statement about what should be happening. There's been a guidance issued in 2014 by the Department of Education, but basically each state can decide whether or not and how much officers should be trained, what their role is, what laws they must enforce in the schools and what ones are discretionary. And then it gets further fractured by differences among school districts and counties' approaches to schools.
So a lot of latitude then. I got to ask you what your impression was when you saw this video start circulating this week about what happened.
Well, I had three strong feelings. One was feeling very sickened. It is horrifying to see a child brutalized and abused that way. Second of all, I felt my default mode of emotion, which is rage. And then I felt really frustrated because we had been asked by advocates in that area to work with the Sheriff's Department's school resource officers. We'd been asked, starting back in November 2014, almost a year ago, to see if we couldn't offer some training to these SROs. And the response we got there is what we hear in a lot of places, that there's no interest to try and invest in that kind of training.
We got about 30 seconds. I want to ask you what the takeaway message needs to be for people out there, what you want people to know.
If you don't train officers in the academy how to work with youth, then you better train them if you're going to put them in schools working exclusively with youth. Otherwise, you have this kind of mess.
Lisa, thank you so much for taking time for us here on CTV News. Really appreciate it.
Thank you.